I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is...
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 18 of the Libertarian Podcast Review. We are here to review your liberty-leaning podcast, maybe help you find that artistic star you just didn't know you needed to have in your life. We compile and give you a heads up of all the best entertainers in the libertarian space, those even adjacent. So look, today on episode 18, we are going to feature Nick Ashley, the Individualist Podcast. It's part of this group that we've been featuring lately, which is the Tower Power Hour, the Towergang, Jose, Clint, all those guys, and Nick is definitely a part of that. He's young, and is his podcast worth it? We're going to find out here pretty soon. Okay. Who is Nick? What is he about? We're going to go start to finish on that. We're going to review some of the categories that I have there, and we're going to play you a ton of clips. So a little behind the scenes here. This is my third attempt at this one. I want to make it right. I had some echoing going on playing the clips. If we're going to review podcasts and talk about production, we're not going to have that to be an issue. So I've had to redo a bunch of them, just some upcoming things. So first of all, this is the 10th, Friday, September 10th. And Josh Smith, I'm going to be on his show on Monday, the 13th. Really looking forward to that. Yesterday, you had kind of a plethora, use that word again, cornucopia of podcasts. You had Josh had his 100th episode. He had on Dave Smith, Adam Nutter, Top Lobster, Phil Labonte and Madge Torre, and then Robbie the Fire Bernstein came in there as well. And then Dave spun out of there, and he went over and saw with Reed Coverdale, Jeremy Todd, Clint Russell of Liberty Lockdown. They did kind of the 6-month review of the Unity project, I would call it. Evidently, David Feit, who had been part of that, as Dave Smith said last night, defected. So he was no longer part of that. I guess he's not into Unity, or at least not into their brand of Unity. Episode 17 interviewed Reed Coverdale of the Naturalist Capitalist Podcast or YouTube channel, whatever. Check that out. We had, it was a live one we did. Only a few people checked in live, but I really enjoyed my conversation with him. Very grateful for his willingness to come on and kind of last minute on there. We talk about that a little bit as well. Then check out episode 17 or 16 where I did Tower Power Hour, or actually that was Lions of Liberty, I think we had. And then so maybe that was 17. What are we on, 18? I lose all the numbers. You go back there and see those, though. Lions of Liberty, Tower Gang, with Drew Hancock, Slurp Gang. Problematic. My next podcast we're going to be reviewing is going to be not a podcast. And I could see why they got me into some hot water with one of their guests. Maybe we'll talk about that. Is that going to taint my review of their podcasts? Likely not. I'm not really that vindictive. Plus, I like them too much. What are you going to do? Say you don't like them just because something went wrong with one person on there? Okay. Nick Ashley, the Individualist Podcast. Who is Nick? He's part of this young podcast content makers, Twitter hounds they have going on. He's pretty young, but he's also got his own podcast. He's been on the Towergang. He's been on Josh Smith. He's been Patrick McFarland. He's been all around, and he's also helped Josh with his microphone issues early on in those things. He comes from what he probably considers the right-leaning side of the politics. At least he actually breaks that down on episode 1. He has a website, Individualist Podcast, and he's on YouTube as well, only briefly. Maybe we'll take a look here at some of the episodes that we've had, and then we could also look at his website and break that down as well. So, Individualist Podcast, he's got 27 episodes. Starting in episode 1, it was like 25 minutes or so where he just introduced what the podcast is going to be about. Then he does his ideological development. In episode 2, Biden's nonsense gun control. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm just telling you those 3 were solos. And then he had his first guest on, Jose Galison, Ace Arcus, Jared Rebel. Jared, I was a little questionable with that one because he is a law student, and typically for me as an attorney, law students are a little bit much. They seem to know it all. They've done a business class, so they just are experts in everything, and everything's theoretical and not real life. And then Jared made the comment where he said he wanted to do family law. Jared, run, don't walk. I'm a family law attorney. Run run away. Actually, maybe we need good family law attorneys in there. But actually, I was pretty happy with what I heard from him in there. He's a smart guy. What else? We have Drew Hancock was on there, Patrick Kirby, Trevor Robinson, Dr. Jonathan Newman. I think that's Patrick Newman's brother. I think he and Patrick are both with the Mises Institute. Patrick is the one that's kind of deciphered a lot of Murray Rothbard's writings and disseminated them out into additional books. Patrick McFarlane, Shane Effing Hazel, Neocon Remover, Though Bishop, James Jenneman, Cotton, Pulse to the Walls podcast, Morality and Legality with Ace, and the last one, Jared of the Hoppian.org. All righty. So those are kind of what we've had. Maybe we'll take a look at his actual website, and you can get an idea. I would go there. It's pretty bare bones, but at least the bare bones part of it is gives you an idea that he's at least got something out there. So he gives a breakdown. Call me a Rothbardian, anarcho-capitalist, anarchist, libertarian, whatever suits your fancy. The label I prefer to use for myself is Austro-libertarian, and we will get into some of that. He talks about his own personal life as far as his personal journey. He's got podcast episodes. If you click on that page there, it lists at least the last 5 or so you can play right there. He's on Anchor. He's on Overcast. He's also on YouTube. He's got a blog that he's written up about some issues. Now, his episode started in February of 2021, and his blog posting is then as well. And he's only made on Twitter a little bit. So, check him out. It's solid stuff. Let's also then look at where he's at on YouTube. So he's got a YouTube page. Look for Nick Ashley. He's got 195 subscribers, 3 episodes posted there. I think we're going to end up trying to encourage him to do more because I actually enjoyed the ones he had there. Part of the thing I enjoy, at least for me, when I'm talking about reviewing these is I'm a little lazy. I don't like to necessarily rip them down and do an MP3 or an MP4 and then play it up as a separate video clip on that. What I like to do is use a podcast catcher or YouTube where you can do it at those specific timestamps, and then I just have a link and I click it and I go from there. It makes it much easier, a little bit lazier. Hence why sometimes maybe I've said on about your podcast that it's not preferable if you're not on YouTube. Anyway, Nick Ashley is on Overcast.fm, which gives me this ability to take that on. Okay, let's do a quick overview, and then we'll start getting into some clips and then talk about some categories. So 27 episodes as of today, the 10th of February. February, that's when he started. The 10th of September. His first episodes were dropped in February 13, basically telling us what he's planning to do. Then he did an overview of his ideology. Then he did another one about Biden's gun control. Then boom, episode 4, he has Jose Galison on. He brought on the mighty No Way Jose. From there, it's been a huge influx for him of guests, a few solo shows, and some audio appearances from other podcasts he's been on. How about the topics? Well, are they specific, or do they pretty much stay within the libertarian movement? Nothing really specific. It's been an interesting smattering of guests. Nick, to me, is super entertaining and funny, and that's why we've seen him on other shows, like with Josh and Fakertarians, as an example, Towergang. We bummed rushed the Fakertarian show, which was fantastic, by the way. But this one is, a lot of times, it's a little bit evergreen, some philosophical topics about specific people, and pretty stellar as far as that goes. Guests, yes, wide-ranging guests. He's had on, the anonymous Twitter people, Ace Arcus, the Neocon Remover, and then real people like Shane Hazel, Jonathan Newman, Reed Coverdale, Drew Hancock. And the only reason I say anonymous is so Ace, Neocon Remover. Ace just recently started showing video of himself, but I don't think Ace Arcus is _ is his real name. Bert Grimm is the Neocon Remover, and he kind of is anonymous as far as his face goes. So, maybe that's not even his real name. People don't want to get doxxed for whatever reason. Totally understand. That's the only reason I say anonymous in a sense there. Duration, the show is about 25 minutes on some of the solo stuff, up to almost an hour. Some of them are a little bit longer, but you're averaging probably around 45, 50 minutes there. The frequency, he's got 27 episodes in the last 7 months. So this averages to just under 4 a month. He did head out to YAL, which is Young Americans for Liberty, I think, in Childeberg. So there was maybe a little bit of a break that he needed there. And look, young, new episode, new podcast, and we'll talk about some of his production stuff as well. Libertarian activism. Is this a libertarian activism show? No, I think it's maybe. I mean, it's pushing his thoughts and he's out there. I don't know if this is his real name. I can't tell. Jose. That's not his real name either. Maybe Jose, since he's out of the military, he'll come out with his actual name. And I was disappointed to hear he's not Hispanic. Anyway, he does outreach as far as his show goes. If that's libertarian activism to you, then so be it. How about we get into the highlights? Okay, let's start off with episode 1 and kind of give a little bit of a sound here to what it is like, his open and podcast episode 1. And here is Nick Ashley on the open.
The Individualist Podcast. Welcome to episode 1 of the Individualist Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Ashley. I'm really excited to be launching this thing. It's been in the works for a bit now. I've been hoping to do it for a while. I just now was able to actually sit down and flesh out a website and get that stuff up and running. So here we are. This first episode is going to be a short introductory one to talk a little bit about myself and what I'm hoping this show is going to be all about. On my website, individualistpodcast.com, I have an About Me tab where you can read a little summary of the things that I believe.
And there we have it for the open on his podcast. Okay, so, look, sometimes I like to do this. We talked with Mark Clare, Lions of Liberty. They're saying, oh my God, this was back, 8-9 years ago. A little bit cringe on some of your first ones. Pete Quinones made that comment. Oh, this is cringe, but this is just episode 1. This is how he came out of the blocks. It's much different process talking to yourself into a recording device than just being able to talk to people or being asked questions. So anyway, that's what it is. The one thing I would say that coming right out of the blocks is you can tell there he's got, and we'll go more in production later, but I just kind of wanted to play this with, he's got some music, it's quality sound with that. He comes in, he's obviously using a mic. I've mentioned this before, but when I was doing I do have a cycling podcast and about almost 300 episodes there. And when I was doing my first few, it starts out as headphones, into a cell phone, and it gets better and better. He starts out right out of the blocks, coming out good quality sound, good microphone. I think he has a Shure microphone there, and nothing to shake a stick at as far as that goes. So me personally, I'm like, we've talked about how some of the shows, the sound quality in production isn't necessarily great. It's just boom, kind of come on, and there it is. And maybe you don't have the ability to do that production yourself. Makes sense, but you're getting a podcast out. Sometimes the content is so much better than the quality of the production that you're okay with it. Nick comes out and he gives us some good quality production right away. And I tried to remember, I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I do enjoy a well put together podcast. It's got some music, a little sound coming in where he's talking, it fades out, and there you have it. And so Nick does in his show, he gives a little brief interlude of usually introducing what the show is going to be about and who's going to be on there. Sometimes like, hey, there was some technical problems here with Drew Hancock as an example, just da-da-da-da-da. And then at the same with the outro. Okay, let's go on to episode 4. He brings in No Way Jose Galison, and we are going to talk here right away. Let's talk about the weather. I think that's what he wants to do.
Welcome to the Individualist Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Individualist Podcast. Today, we have our first guest of the show, Jose Galison. He is the host of the No Way Jose podcast. You can find him on YouTube. The channel name is No Way Jose. He is also a creator for the YouTube channel called The Liberty Movement. He is an agorist, anarchist, and I am very happy to have him on the show. Welcome, Jose. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. You?
I'm doing great. Oh, are you getting pummeled by the cold weather, freezing your pipes and everything? Are you in a spot where it's not hurting you too bad?
No, I'm in Florida, so it's
okay.
We're chilling.
I'm in Georgia. We're not getting too much. We're not getting too bad anyway. It's cold, but it isn't too bad.
Okay, I don't know why I played that. I just thought it was interesting because he talks a little later about the weather as well. Okay, so is there such a thing as an alt-right to liberty pipeline, or is it the pipeline going from liberty to the alt-right? Jose Galison, we continue with you.
They wouldn't even recognize that there is a hypocrisy there because in their mind, the principles don't exist in the first place.
Exactly.
So what kind of, I know you said Ron Paul was a sort of a catalyst for you getting involved in this stuff. Do you have any, I like reading Rothbard, I like reading Bastiat, even though Bastiat wasn't expressly an anarchist, he was a radical minarchist, I would say. Are there people that you started to read and started to get more into this? Who are your favorites whenever, off the top of your head, who do you like to read in this anarchism, libertarianism stuff?
Well, I guess we can kind of tie this back into my development. Really, the big part of my development. I know you kind of were. I feel like you were kind of like inching at what was your moment? And I know a lot of people have a moment. I didn't have a moment from becoming a libertarian. My moment was becoming an anarchist. And so my moment, and that came from reading, which came from really was I've been listening to Dave Smith podcast for forever. Part of the problem.
Yeah.
And he always went on about anatomy of the state with Rothbard, and I just was not someone who even really read. I mean, I would read comics here and there, but nothing like too crazy. I wouldn't read any philosophy and stuff. And then just him going on about it forever and ever, it was just finally his cult of personality that drew me into what, I should read this book. And I kind of was at that point, I was like a minarchist, kind of constitutionalist.
Right.
And so I read Anatomy of the State, and a big part of Anatomy of the State is he just kind of points out the logical flaws and that this would even work at all. And he kind of did focus a lot on the founding and the Constitution and just how power will just naturally over time, just no matter what, you can wish all you want and be like, Constitution's this great document. And if we only just did that, if we only just did this, and it's but the problem is, we're not just wishing that is just wishing on a star, hoping that people just go back to the Constitution. It's that's not going to happen. If only people did good things and not bad things,
yeah, of course,
it's just wishful thinking, So that's kind of what Anatomy of the State really drove home for me. And that was that. I mean, I've with reading though, that was my big book. Probably my other big, transformational book was probably Konkin's books. Obviously, Agorist Primer, A New Libertarian Manifesto, and then Agorist Class Primer. They were all great. He's a great author. Rothbard, him, God, Larkin's great. Superstition, Most Dangerous Superstition is a great book. Obviously, Spooner. I've read of Spooner. Those are probably, I'd say, probably the ones that were most transformational. I think I literally read Anatomy of the State, and I think I read No Treason After.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically just did a 1-2 on whatever delusion I had of the Constitution.
Oh yeah, yeah. That.
Yes, that's well done there, Galison. Your pipeline to the alt-right. Okay. Next one is, this has to do with the concept of kind of the communists and what they're about, multiple generations. They talk about that, and then I have, perhaps, is it a bone to pick? We'll see.
They got into that personally.
Yes, they got into that a little bit. It's just they don't have any meaningful difference, between the two. And it's just, I don't know. It's a nightmare trying to debate them. Most of the time, I just go, "Are you trying to impose violence on me? No, okay, I don't care. Whatever."
All right,
because at that point, it's
exactly.
What economic system are you do you think we should use? It's more just a preference statement at that point.
Well,
I mean, the biggest thing, like I said, is the private property thing. If you say you're going to impose violence on private property, then they're like,
that's not cool with me.
I don't care. If you think magically once we get real estate, we're all going to voluntarily live in communes and it's just going to be great, then cool, whatever. You can have that thought. I don't care. But I don't think
their number is 3 generations. I could be quoting that wrong, but I think they believe that within 3 generations of a communist society, a new communist man will have arisen and will not want to own anything, and everybody will be pretty much a collective of, there won't be individuals anymore, from what I understand. I could be getting it wrong, so sorry, angry communist, preemptively, I apologize. I could be getting it wrong. Most of this knowledge is absorbed through osmosis from listening to other people talking about it.
Yeah, and I've heard that before too, the 3 generations.
Okay.
And you know what? With
Okay, so there we go. So I don't believe that. Yes, it's probably right. The communists do believe that. I just don't think that's ever attainable. You're gonna have to make people kind of go against their own self-will in a sense for a lot of this. And then secondly, osmosis. That is the movement of solvent between 2 permeable membranes, semi-permeable membranes. So I'm gonna. It's the jihad of my life, and something a hill I'm gonna die on. I think we're gonna say diffusion. People always say, "Oh, look, I laid on a book and I learned by osmosis." No, you didn't. Maybe you learned by diffusion, which is the transfer of it's not a solvent basically, or water. Think of it that way. Although now that I think about this, Nick talking about these commies, maybe they're a little bit on the hydrocephalic, which is cephalus, which is cephalic, hydrocephalus, I think it is, water on the brain. So maybe that is the transfer you have there. Okay, all I'm saying is just use diffusion. It maybe helps, and nothing against Nick or anybody else. This is just my own personal problem, so my own little engineering autistic way I have about me. Okay, let's go to episode 5. It was Ace Archist comes onto the show, and he had an interesting thing. Well, first of all, Nick, and I'll probably mention this again later, but was saying at the start of this, or at the end of this episode, that he was somewhat nervous about it. But he actually did a great job. And this one, have you heard? I learned all kinds of stuff on these shows, and one of them is about Nesballs. Have you heard of Nasballs? Nasballs is, I think that.
Whenever you were arguing with, I think they were Nasballs about Ross Ulbricht.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, that was wild.
Now, were they Nasballs, or am I getting that wrong?
No, they were.
Okay, now
Yes,
for the uninitiated, could you explain briefly what a Nasball is? Because I'm not that familiar with the concept myself.
Yeah, they're Nazi Bolsheviks,
Okay.
which are so you take fascism and then you take communism and you mix them together a little bit and you get a Nazbol.
So it's a
Like
really awful abomination.
Yeah, they're pretty much the worst thing you can imagine.
I thought so. So the Ross.
Yeah, that does sound like the worst thing you can imagine. Nazballs. I didn't know that was a thing, but evidently it is. So now Ace Archist comes on here, and he has a discussion first early on regarding Ross Ulbricht. And Ross Ulbricht, if you don't know much about him, I would encourage you actually to listen to the episode. And when you do so, he'll end up informing you of a lot of it. But if you do know something about it, I thought this was fairly interesting about the murder for hire, and then we'll talk about that coming up here. Okay, and let's see if
Here is that there's these claims of murder for hire, that he hired hitmen
I've
to
heard of that.
assassinate people. Well, there's no actual proof that it was him who did this, right? Or all they have is a chat log with the admin account known as Dread Pirate Roberts, seemingly hiring a guy who is trying to extort them for money, right? That he's trying to hire a hitman for a guy who is threatening to extort the website, and it's get the feds involved in it. And but there's a couple things that everyone misses, right? It's true that Ross was, I believe he. Well, I don't even know if that is true. There's no proof that he was that Dread Pirate Roberts, right?
Right.
And we know there's multiple of them because people on the website themselves admitted there's multiple of them. One of the people who was an admin on the site admitted there's multiple of them. And then we also have proof because the Dread Pirate Roberts account logged in while he was in jail. So that account got logged in while he was in jail. So this idea that
That was him, is in question, right?
yeah, exactly. So they the idea that people can just go out and say, "Oh, well, he hired hitmen." Well, for one, you have no proof that was even him, or to be honest, if even the chat logs are accurate, right? Because they could have been tampered with. We know there were feds on the website, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
you have to, all these things get called into question immediately, and you can't. I think it's very wrong just to take these at face value, especially when 2 of the agents who were on the website undercover went to prison for stealing Bitcoin off the website.
Oh,
So
yeah, I wasn't aware of that either.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, and one other item you might want to think about there is, so he had these murder for hire charges, and then he goes to, the whole trial and through sentencing, and the murder for hire charges were absolutely dropped. They didn't adjudicate those at all, partly because they couldn't find anything, and it just was bullshit. So, but in the sentencing, they did use that against him, which is pretty heinous. And coming from, I can't understand how you wouldn't have that as a major, almost an immediate appealable issue. And I know they are appealing this. So at least on the sentencing, I think it's been given 2 life sentences. Okay, this next one, we are going to talk about a few things. One is, once again, talk about the weather.
That's going on. You're not somewhere where the weather's killing you, is it?
No, I'm in Maine right now, but it's not. I'm not getting a huge amount of snow.
Oh, okay. So you're way
Yeah.
up there. So you're using the cold regardless. You're not gonna the stuff that's
Yeah.
going on in Texas. That's
Oh, yeah,
normal
no.
stuff for you.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing all these sneering neoliberals just giving Texas and Texans so much shit for. Oh, well, that's what happens when you have a red state, or that's what happens when you have deregulation. That's a whole nother conversation. I know there's a lot of, deregulation. There's way more to the story than that, and I don't really want to get into that too badly, but doesn't it piss you off whenever these sneering libs just talk shit about the poor people who are having their pipes busted, who have no control over what regulations there are ultimately?
Right. And these people are always the ones who say, and I mean, justifiably so, would say, it's not okay to victim blame. You know, so it's always right. To them, it's just about, and to conservatives too, I don't want to come here as like biased just against one side, but
Of course.
like, they just use whatever means they can. They will never let any type of event, whether catastrophe or tragedy, go to waste, right?
Exactly.
Whatever they can use to pursue their power and pursue their influence, they will take, right? And this is like for me, it's not even a fact of what conservatives will do is when they get attacked by liberals is they'll point out how inconsistent they are.
Yeah.
But it's like going back to the argumentation ethics to try to convince people. It's like they just don't care. Right?
Exactly.
It's like you pointing out that they're a hypocrite. Well, it's good to point out that people are hypocrites so that other people, in the crowd maybe can see them as hypocrites too.
Educate a third party on that.
That's right. But if you think you're going to change these people's minds by showing, oh, hey, you're actually wrong here. You shouldn't be pursuing this power. It's like, well, most people just don't act like that, right? They're just going to ignore you and pretend you don't exist or demean you in some way.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, that was a reason. Look, I used to be part of the GOP and Republican, and I've left it, and I don't plan on going back. I know there's some conflict right now about should libertarians be joining the GOP or be pushing that. Me personally, the hypocrisy and all that, I'm not making my way back to that group. I'll vote as I wish. But as far as that goes, no, I'm not going to. One other item here, a little bit of the issue that they spoke about, which is near and dear to my heart, is the issue of the utopian myth. So I thought this was greatly done. I talked to Clint, Liberty Lockdown, when he was on my show, kind of about this. And I think I've heard a few other people, it's not because of me, but maybe we're just all coming to it from the same realization. Because every time you talk about anarchy, they always talk that it's a utopia. You're trying to get a utopia. And I personally believe it's not that way. And these two gentlemen nail it out of the park of basically concurring with my points of view. So here we go. Ace and Nick.
No anarchists. Okay, let me not say no, because I'm certain that there's some anarcho-communists, not to pick on them in particular, but there are certain people that are utopian whenever they are talking about anarchism.
Right.
But, no anarchists that I follow, none of our fellow travelers would say everything's going to get better. Everything's going to be perfect, rather. It's just an improvement. It's a removal of a single ill from the human condition.
It fixes one bad problem. Yeah. That's it, right? It's just
to me, saying that you shouldn't want to abolish the state because that it's utopian to want to do that is akin to saying we shouldn't be curing some of the diseases we have now because humans will never eradicate disease. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and then you'll die anyway. Deal, right? It's like, well, I guess, yeah. It's like, but yeah, let me just speak on the utopian thing too, because that brought up a great point. Is people always use utopian in two different ways, right? Utopian in the literal sense means a place that can't exist, that's impossible to exist, or what most people mean by it is that it's just unrealistic, right? That's what they mean. And I want to counter that by saying that actually most people alive today have utopian beliefs in that sense, that they're unrealistic every day of their lives, and they think that's fine. So an example I use is that we'll never eradicate, or probably never will eradicate, murder from the human condition. Okay, but we don't then see people concluding from that realization that, well, we need to accept some murder as legitimate or justified. You know what I mean? So like these people have utopian beliefs everywhere, all over the place. They can look for them anywhere.
Right. And well said. And I can't disagree more. So my concept is, something that doesn't exist, kind of your little litmus test, cheap way of going about it is, my feeling is it's places that you have to use coercion. So if this idea is you got to be coerced into that idea, and then coercion is also required to keep you there, maybe that place that you're trying to get, that philosophy, is utopia. What I'm trying to do is just everyone, anarchy in a sense is definitely not that, but it also leads to the fact if you ever get there, you're probably not going to stay there for very long. Okay. Episode 10, he had Drew Hancock on. They started this thing off pretty hot, talking about, of course, a viral tweet of some sort, and Duncan Lemp, Daniel Shaver. And I thought this was a good way to start this one out.
I am doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time, man. So we were speaking about this before we started recording. You had something go real viral on Twitter that I came across, because was it today or yesterday, the anniversary of Duncan Lemp's death?
I think it was yesterday.
So explain what I'm talking about here. What happened with your viral tweet?
So with my tweet, there was some police shooting, which was more of a gray one than usual. Like I could see both sides of it, but nonetheless, there was a reply to it saying, if you comply with the police, 100% of the time you will live to see another day, and you can fight them in court if you think they were wronged.
Yeah.
And I just quote tweeted it with a picture from the Daniel Shaver video of him sitting in the hallway with his hands straight up in the air. And yeah, it's at like 20,000 likes right now.
Have you gotten a whole influx of follows from that?
So not too many follows. Like I got like another 50 followers from it. It really blew up with like BLM Twitter and stuff. So I got like 16 likes in the first minutes. I was like, oh, this might make the rounds. I linked my police video in the reply to it. And yeah, I got a bunch more subscribers and stuff. I also have a lot more dislikes of people telling me, because at one point in the video, I say racism's not the problem with police. It's their power and their ability to harm peaceful people. And a lot of progressives like BLM people, they'll hear that and they'll just tune out of everything else.
Which is too bad to hear, because the tuning out is not good. You know, you're way able to defend it on your side. You're all happy, and then as soon as it's happening to someone else that you don't like that side, well, then it's okay. So they're going to tune out on that one. Yeah, interesting. I thought that was an interesting perspective that Drew Hancock gave of his video, and how, you know, those are things, as we've talked about, should be spanning both sides of the aisle and everyone be in agreement. And anyway, episode 10, we continue with Drew, and he talks about Section 230, which I found to be, I learned some things, and I don't know if he changes over time on some of this, but it's pretty good, astute analysis of this near the end here. Let's go episode 10, Drew.
Especially as of late is, and you have a video on this, of course, and why I'm bringing it up is the social media and Section 230. Your video, I didn't really know a whole lot about Section 230 before watching your video, and I'm still not too clear on exactly how the things are working. The one thing that I want to ask you, though, because the big contention is if they should be treated like a public utility, and I'm putting that in quotes, people, or if they're really a private company, and again, that's in quotes. And some people make the argument that, well, no, they're receiving subsidies, which, as you point out, is really not subsidies, but most of the time it's tax breaks. But I do remember part of the conversation whenever Donald Trump was on Twitter, and there was a conversation being had whether or not he should be able to block people. So some people, it seems like a lot of people want social media companies to be viewed as a public utility when it suits them, and a private company when it suits them otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. But I mean, yeah, basically with the whole Section 230 thing, a lot of people completely misunderstand it, and they think that it defines what a publisher and a platform is. All of that was decided through like court cases beforehand. And the Section 230 was basically just overriding the second court case between Stratton Oakmont, and I don't remember who they were versus, but and yeah, so stuff about Donald Trump not being able to block people, I haven't heard about that. But here's what I will say. I know that Twitter's being sued right now because there was like a 12-year-old boy who had a pornographic video of himself uploaded.
Oh my
and
God.
they're claiming Section 230 as their defense. So I say in the video that there's exceptions to Section 230 for stuff like that. That basically could completely flip me on the issue, where if that holds up in court, where Twitter can't be sued for hosting that content because of Section 230, then yeah, I'll be all in favor of getting rid of Section 230. Like people.
Okay, that makes sense. And, you know, we also have we have our own morality, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just because something's moral doesn't necessarily mean it is legal, doesn't necessarily mean it is moral. Okay, we started up front discussing, telling you about Nick's like philosophy, Austro-economics. So with that in mind, he brings on Dr. Jonathan Newman from Mises.org, who's also a professor of economics at a small college, and they have a good discussion. One of those things that they first talk about is being an Austro-economist, actually being a libertarian. So Jonathan Newman gives you a little bit of his answer here, and maybe a breakdown as to the go ahead if you want to be a libertarian and an Austro-economic.
A dozen episodes in, and I have on my website that I consider myself to be an Austro-libertarian for the reason that the discovery of the Austrian school was so foundational in me becoming a libertarian. So I think I know the answer to this first question that I'm going to ask you here, but being that you're affiliated with the Mises Institute, and most Austrian economists tend to be this, but do you consider yourself a libertarian?
Yes, definitely. And really the relationship between Austrian economics and libertarianism should be pretty obvious. And the reason why is because a lot of the conclusions of Austrian economics lend themselves to the government not being able to improve on market outcomes. So we see it in voluntary exchange, there's mutual benefit, prices are coordinated in the market. There's not really room for the government to come in and make things better. And in fact, whenever the government does try to step in, it usually makes people worse off. It makes them do things that they otherwise wouldn't have done. And so really because of like the main conclusions of Austrian economics, there's this overlap between Austrian economists and libertarians, and vice versa, I'd say, mainly because the conclusions of, even though Austrian economics is an objective scientific way of doing economics, which means that there aren't any policy prescriptions that come out of Austrian economics, there's still a lot of overlap because the conclusions lend themselves to the liberty position.
Yeah, and
There you go. So you have the right now you are given the pass to be called a libertarian if you want that. I just thought that was an interesting start with kind of a description there. Another item they're going to talk about here is about reading the intro, and then Nick actually makes a good point about do you know any economists? You know, we're really big into knowing everything about names of scientists, and he'll talk about that. And Jonathan Newman gives him a good answer here.
I think it's in both Human Action and Man, Economy, and State. There's this great discussion about Mises's and Rothbard's views on monopoly, because there was a little bit of a difference of opinion there. And so it's just great to see those sorts of things before you get into the book. So I highly recommend anybody who's looking at reading some Austrian literature, don't skip the introduction and don't skip the footnotes.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember telling this to my coworkers. You know, I didn't learn the name of any single economist when I was in high school or college, except for Adam Smith and John Maynard Keynes. But every scientific, you know, or I don't know, theory or what, you know, would be the correct word, but every scientific thing that I learned about, not every one, but most of them, I learned the scientists behind it. You know, I learned in chemistry who came up with the plum pudding model of the atom, and who came up with X, Y, or Z model of whatever else thing. And I learned about Isaac Newton, and I learned about Leibniz and calculus. So I didn't learn any, in high school, I didn't learn any economist's name except for Adam Smith. And in college, it wasn't even, I took maybe one or two economics classes. I think just one even. But it was in a history class where we were speaking about, we were around World War II and how, you know, it got us out of the Depression, quote unquote. And John Maynard Keynes came up because it was his, you know, that's basically his kind of thing there. That is really a great thing. And Austrians aren't afraid to say, hey, I think my predecessor was incorrect. And we see that especially with Walter Block in particular, who does it all the time. To the point where it's funny, really. And it's like, well, you got to be able to do that. You have to build on what you see as mistakes to learn and to grow. So I'm glad you made that point.
Rothbard makes that point explicitly in at the beginning of his History of Economic Thought text. So at the beginning of Economic Thought before Adam Smith, I think it might be the introduction, actually talks about the difference in the Whig theory of history and the Kuhnian theory of history. And the point there is that one way to look at the history of ideas is that we're just constantly getting better and better.
Yeah.
So like the newest idea is always the best because it just builds on the last thing that was written by the most recent guy. And then we clarified a little bit, and then we add that to the body of literature, and then somebody else comes on and makes it even better. So like it's this progressive, always getting better.
Mm-hmm.
As compared to the theory of history that says, no, sometimes we drop the ball. We make mistakes sometimes. So in the history of economic thought, first of all, it doesn't even make sense to say that we're constantly improving.
Yeah.
Because economists that are in the same time period, contemporary economists will say mutually exclusive, conflicting things about economics. So it doesn't make sense to say that at least economic thought has progressed in this linear, always getting better sort of way, but that some economists are carrying one tradition, other economists are carrying another tradition. And the way Rothbard does economic thought books is he is not ashamed to say, yeah, these guys dropped the ball. These guys, they didn't do a good job. They made this sort of mistake. And of course,
There you go. So I thought that was an interesting one there. It's almost like applying the scientific theory to economics, which, you know, should be the case. Let's keep going here. Jonathan Newman gets posed a good question about Keynesianism, Mises, and MMT. And if you haven't known much about MMT, this should actually interest you a little bit. And Dr. Robert Murphy has written about it as well over at Mises.org. And here we go. Jonathan Newman.
Over a dozen episodes in, and I have on my website that I consider myself to be an Austro-libertarian for the reason that the discovery of the Austrian school was so foundational in me becoming a libertarian. So I think
Okay, so this is one of those where I screwed up the
spot.
Let's see if we can find it right here. And then
sort of way, but that some economists are, which is just preposterous if you think about it. Because, I mean,
economics is always
thought.
Okay, and we will try once again from this spot going forward.
It's just it's brilliant to do it that way.
Completely off the wall question here.
Sure.
But now that I've mentioned Keynes, we can kind of get into this. So I feel just from a layman's perspective, the nemesis of Austrian school economics has always been Keynesian school. Do you think so?
Sure. Yeah. So there are differences between the Austrian school and the monetarist school.
Oh, you have a great lecture on that.
Yeah, probably the biggest differences are between the Austrians and the Keynesians, especially when it comes to policy prescriptions.
Okay, and my actual question is, do you think that MMT, modern monetary theory, for those who aren't familiar, may unseat Keynesianism as the nemesis of the Austrians? Because from what I see on Bob Murphy's Twitter, it looks like it's going in that direction.
I would say yes and no. So yes, because MMT gives everything that the politicians want,
yes, which
is a blank check for government spending. But also no, because I wouldn't say that MMT is saying anything that's much different than standard Keynesianism.
That's true.
So it's a new term, but it's really old ideas. There's a great post by Jeff Deist on Mises.org that explains this. It's just inflationism dressed up in new language. The idea that there's no constraint on what governments can do in terms of spending, that taxes are just a tool that the government can use to increase or decrease the amount that consumers are spending. These ideas are as old as Keynesianism is.
Yeah.
All right, and they're just as dangerous as always. So look, part of this, sorry, on the production side here, for me, like I said, I get links and I post them out, and using some of these different software programs, StreamYard is, for example, what I use. It doesn't always work the best. Anyway, Jonathan Newman, that's all we're going to show for him. Let's go into episode 19. I thought Nick did a really good job here. He had neocon remover on to discuss, and he basically just had a bunch of Twitter questions and then went through them, and it was a lot of fun. So he takes questions from Twitter. He asked Bert Grimm to answer them. Bert is neocon remover. And by the way, you can learn a lot here from this about how to conduct yourself and what's appropriate and not for following Bert on Twitter. A neocon remover, I don't know who I'm supposed to refer to you as. So you can say he's kind of like Michael Malice, because he's very touchy on some of these things, a little like Michael Malice, but with a smaller following. Not to at all be rude about that. I think he gets evicted from Twitter more often than Michael Malice does somehow. Okay, here we go. Neocon remover with.
Okay. It looks like a lot of these are not exactly serious. Oh, here's a good one.
Well, just read all of them, don't you think? Or no? Are they really bad?
I will. I'm gonna read them all. Well, I'll just go down the list. Well, the first one is, have you seen this man? And it's a picture of some guy. So I don't know. We'll ignore that one. I guess.
Describe the guy.
He's an older man making faces. He's got glasses and gray hair and a muscle shirt.
Is he pulling his face?
Yeah.
Kind of. Oh, okay. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
It's Ed Buck.
I don't know who that is.
Wow. Disavow, dude.
I'm sorry.
That's some research for you.
Okay.
Google Ed Buck.
All right, so we can Google Ed Buck, which I already knew who he was, but we'll share this here and just let you see exactly who Ed Buck is. Ed Buck is a prominent Democrat donor convicted in deaths of 2 men he gave jobs. It's pretty salacious little outing there. And, look, if you don't know who he is, I'm sorry. But Google these things and you'll find out. Okay, next one we have here is a Twitter poll decorum. And once again, I'm still figuring out what to do on Twitter to make sure that these people don't hate me. And let's see what they.
Individual @last_individual. How do you feel about write-in answers on Twitter polls?
Whenever they're not asked, I hate it.
Me too. I think he's taking a stab at me because I spurg out over it.
Yeah,
like I
actually kind of hate anyone who replies to my tweets.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Not really.
Oh God, this person made fun of me for my horrifically bad grammatical error in the original tweet because I said, this is what I said. The tweet was supposed to say, going to be recording a show with that neocon remover this Sunday. And what it says is, going to be doing recording show. So I don't know how I wanted to do that.
I read it.
It's for the audience, Bert.
I'm sorry.
They might not be reading it. But yeah, so this person's, I've been doing recording show. And with the like the font of the like bird-looking SpongeBob with all the capital and lowercase letters mixed about. Okay, I'm sorry. I screwed up, Alan. I apologize. Lovely Ace Archist asks, why did gay Obama order the $65,000 pizza? Excellent question.
That is a great question. I think Comet Ping Pong is the only people who know the true answer to that.
Comet Ping Pong.
Yes, in DC.
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay.
the Libertarian Party blue-pilled caucus at LP_blue-pilled. The events of the past year have shown that the most important libertarian issue of our lifetime is anti-racism, followed closely by the right of transgender toddlers to receive chemical treatments. Where do you stand on these issues?
Dude, you don't even need to qualify the blue-pilled caucus. That's just like every libertarian person, every person in the Libertarian Party.
Not me.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot they're taking it over.
I just love the wit he has there going on. Okay, so once again, I thought the Q&A with Neocon Remover was solid work, and it was a little lighter side of everything, yet they get into all kinds of stuff. Okay, the next one is actually near and dear to my heart, which is another one with Ace, and this time he did put it up on YouTube, and this one is we breaks down the legality and morality with Ace. That's kind of the whole. That's the topic of the show. And so let's set that up. And I think Ace does a bang up job on this, as you would expect, and as always, for understanding what is the legality and the difference between the two.
You were in a group chat that I'm in with you on Twitter talking about the issue of legality versus morality and how that's cropping up on Twitter all over the place, where people are arguing and like presuming and kind of implying that if you don't approve of something in a moral sense, then that means you have to be against it in a legal sense, i.e. it should be outlawed or it's a violation of the NAP or whatever. So what do you have to say about that if you want to just have the floor?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is something that's kind of bothered me for a while, and I think that libertarians especially should be kind of more up on this than I think a lot of them are, because they understand, right, this is the argument they use against conservatives. Just because you don't personally approve of something, or something you might find morally distasteful or a moral failing, it doesn't mean that should be illegal. And I kind of see this in the libertarian movement, and I'm not, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. It's certain people, not everyone, but I certainly see there's a tendency among some libertarians to kind of take the idea of the NAP, or like this ethic that we propose, and try to construe it as something that's like, okay, well, if you believe this is within a person's right, that means that you must believe that it's morally just for them to employ that right in all cases, right? And that's not necessarily true. That doesn't logically follow necessarily, right? Like there's a lot of things. There are many, many examples of a person using their rights that we would think is wrong, right? So, and you also see this, when people bring up, well, it's just a private company, right? So even if we say that,
all right, that's enough of that one. So just kind of give you the setup into where he is going with that. And by the way, is it ever okay to violate the NAP in terms of morality and legality? Maybe they have something to say about that one as well.
Just as you said earlier, you would violate the NAP to stop somebody from committing suicide. Yeah. I think I would probably want to do that. I might do that if somebody was going down the road of hard drug abuse, and maybe I would take their stuff. Maybe I would lock them out of the room with their stash. I don't know. It's kind of a thing where and you are accepting that you are infringing on somebody else's right to do that.
Oh yes,
So in a sense, you are, not you specifically, Ace, but you in general, if you are going to do something like that, that is sort of hypocritical. But that's a matter of, I'm willing to accept the consequences for this rights violation that I am inflicting on somebody else.
And unlike the state would say that, well, no, we just have a right to do this, right? Whereas I would say that, no, I would do this in certain circumstances, but I would never delude myself into thinking I have a ethical right or obligation to do so.
Okay, so with that, you can understand violating the NAP does have consequences still, and they're not at all saying that there's not recourse for the other side if I violate their rights. In a sense, I still may have that, but once again, sometimes you have to go by your own morality and creed and code. Okay, we'll keep going on that. What are the odds of getting to Ancapistan? And also, Ace, what is your education background? Let's see if we can play this.
From Caleb, at Caleb, a bunch of numbers. What are odds we see actual anarchism in America in the next 20 to 40 years? I think that's a weird question, but
okay. So I think some people get confused when they talk about anarchism.
There is anarchism in America right now. Yes. There is. It does exist right now, but not the colloquial anarchism as in no state at all.
Right. So yeah, I think people get really confused, and I think you made a really good point there, which is that people conflate an anarchist society with anarchism itself, and I see this all the time, especially on the criticisms. So anarchism is just it's a social ethic. It's a interpersonal ethic, which states that ruling other people is illegitimate, right? Mm-hmm. Coercively dominating other people is illegitimate. So anytime another person has To answer the question, I do think there will be, and there are right now, pockets of anarchism in America, and I do think there will be more in the future. I don't think America, as we define it within these borders, will be an anarchist society or a huge anarchist country or anything like that. But I do think there's possibility for those pockets to expand, and I do think that it's important to make a distinction between anarchism and an anarchist society.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's anarchism in existence right now, and always has been and always will be.
Yes.
So you don't have to answer this. It may be a little personal. I mean, I don't know what you would define as personal, but this is from Joao. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. I know you though. That's at Stateless FGC. Did you go to college, get trained by NSA to be a better Fed, or get big brained on your own?
So it's funny. I was homeschooled actually, and I'm pretty much. I can tell
you're really fucking smart.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Nick. I was homeschooled, and I'm practically, I'm pretty much like kind of not. I don't know, like I'm trying to say this without like tooting my own horn, but I'm basically, I learned on my own pretty much.
You're big brain on your own. That's all. That's fine. We're just answering a question.
I don't understand.
I understand. We got you, brother. It's all right.
It will be interesting to note there that Ace, maybe he's going to go into politics someday, because he didn't actually answer the question about did you go to college? Yeah, no one's. I'm always curious about a lot of these people's background, and not for anything other than just it's fills in the story about who they are, and it makes you you enjoy them more. Whether he went to college or not really doesn't matter to me. His intellect and his ability to debate and give arguments is pretty top notch. Okay, next though, Nick really puts it to him and gives him the ultimate philosophical question, which we've probably all had at some point. And Lars Ulrich, Hitler, are they equatable?
Would you kill baby Hitler or baby Lars Ulrich?
Oh.
I will say this: Lars Ulrich gets way more hate than he deserves, and I will not apologize for that opinion.
Well, I don't see. Here's the thing: if you kill Hitler, then the timeline is just ruined, because then it's just like who knows what the butterfly effects will be. But that could be said about anything. So I don't know. I guess Hitler. So if I have to choose, if I'm forced into this choice, then I guess Hitler.
Ace doing political.
Okay. That's what we have for that one. So he took the look. If you'd killed baby Lars Ulrich, maybe you would still have Napster, though. I mean, just a thought out there. I don't know if that's something we need and or miss in our lives. All those of you still hanging out, congratulations, and I appreciate that. But last quote we'll do, or clip we'll do here, is with Jared from the Hoppian.org. And I thought it was a good intro for kind of giving you an idea of where the Hoppian.org came from. Also a contrast to libertarianism.org. And I think we can play this right out here.
Sure that my audience is very familiar with you and your work. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Hoppian.org, why you decided to create it, and what you think is a Hoppian to you.
So we started Hoppian.org probably a year ago. The inclination to start Hoppian.org had been there since probably post 2012, after the Ron Paul campaign ended, and there was a lot of internal strife in the libertarian idiosphere. We can get into that more, but essentially after that, there was a severe uptick in the amount of, I guess, what I would call lowberts and left libertarians, and a resurgence in the regime libertarians. And I know that I'm using a bunch of terms here, but those really are distinct groups to me. And with that, all of them kind of push towards this more egalitarian kind of worldview a little bit. And if you look back at the kind of the Misesian tradition with Rothbard and David Gordon and Hans Hoppe and all of these guys that really are to their core anti-egalitarian, it's really hard. It was really hard to see, like for a right libertarian or a Hoppian or whatever, or even traditional Rothbardians, it was difficult to see, and we had to do something about it. At least, I hate to use this term because it's a term that the left uses all the time, but speak truth to power, right? Right. And with that, we decided, well, we're just going to start writing, and if people like it, they'll support us, and if not, well, at least we got a platform to start ranting from, right? So, especially with the advent of things like libertarianism.org, are you familiar with that whole thing?
I am not.
Oh man, when it got started, it's a branch of Cato, and it was
all
like,
I need to know.
yeah, and it was like, oh well, we're libertarianism.org. Obviously, we know everything about libertarianism, right? And then they start pushing the egalitarian ethic, of course, through Cato and everything else. So we're kind of a response to that, but more of a response to the whole lowbert. God, I hate that word. I really do, but it's the only word that I can use to describe them because it's such an awkward sounding word. But it's really the only thing I can use to describe them. We're the anti-left libertarians, I guess you could say.
Now, would you make a distinction between a left libertarian?
And we'll let you find out if he does make a distinction between the left libertarian and, I'm not really sure. Look, I thought so great there. And part of that, it reminds me when I was first trying to get into this libertarian, I needed to find out more info. I wanted to find, people and consume a bunch of things. I found libertarianism.org and I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. David Bose, and saw some videos, and it was him at like a conference table with some nerdy kids and asking really stupid questions. It turned me off so much, and I'm glad I ran away from that altogether. Okay, so those are the clips that we have. So let's go through, and we're almost done here. Let's go through some of the categories and just get through what I what I think about Nick and his podcast here. So we'll talk about the intro, music, and the outro as an example. Look, his intro, right from episode 1, he did really good. Like I said, I loved to see the quality that's come up with this. And then you go through the contrast of the content, and he's got great content as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed going through the catalog. But like I mentioned before, sometimes the production isn't so great on some of these. And this one came right up from episode 1. He hit it out of the box, and he improved on it even some going forward. So kudos to him. I mean, if you watch that there, you could see he has guitars in the background, an amp. He has a nice mic. He's at least on top of it, and he's done that. He's got the music in there, some sort of metal band, production. So as I said, with the Towergang and some of these others, it's maybe not, but you're there for the laughs, you're there for the shits and the giggles, and this is both. And by the way, I thought at the last one he gave an F-bomb there, and then on episode 4 with Jose's like, can I curse? And he's like, let's keep it PG-13, all right, buddy? And I think he's since gone away from that. How about ads? Well, Nick here, I don't think he's probably got the downloads to garner the ads, but he's got the quality and the content to do so. So I think that's going to come at some point, as long as he's continuing to make them. I mean, it's been almost, he hasn't done one for a little while. So he's going to be obviously, hopefully doing well enough to get some ads and get your patronage as well. Timeliness of the topics, we've talked about that. Most of them are kind of evergreen on that side. Does he have a peer or a Patreon group? I've not seen that he has any Patreon group or tier group, but I would imagine once you get going on that, he probably will. And a lot of these guys, hey, get his subs up higher on his YouTube channel. And if that's the case, perhaps he will start being able to do super chats, and you can help him out on that. Young guy, 25, I think, married. I don't think he has kids. Come on, let's support these people. The outro, once again, it's been good. Sometimes he does a little breakdown of what just happened. Sometimes on the intro, he does a little breakdown of what's going to take place, and he does those well. So the last bit, they're tangibles. His host's ability to interview, well, Nick is 25, but I think he's well read, and I've been pretty impressed with his ability to go toe-to-toe. And, Jonathan Newman comes on. It's a kind of it could be a deep topic, about economics, especially to an economics professor, especially a niche that you have with the Mises side and the Austro-Libertarian. And he does a great job with that. And he had good questions back and forth with Ace, as well as we heard here. And Drew Hancock, I will say, I was disappointed with the Drew Hancock interview for one reason, okay? I wanted to interview Drew and ask him basically all those same questions that Nick did. So I'm listening. I'm like, here's what I would ask. And then he's asking him. So only disappointed in the fact that he got to do it instead of me. His ability to riff and give opinions, I think that's well done. He's well researched for those things as well. I don't think he's reading into a script except for those first 3 episodes when he talked about it. So his ability to just interview and go off the cuff is pretty good. You can't really tell either way. Overall impression here, what scale of libertarian is he? Well, he claims to be ANCAP or right-leaning, maybe even a little bit Hoppian coming out in there. Is it shareable with normies? And to me, this is always the prime one to kind of take a look at. Do you want to be able to share? We've talked about this before. I don't think some of these, I'm not going to name names, is the one you want to give them to begin with to kind of red pill them and get them down that slippery slope. Anything with libertarian.org, no, that's not what you want either. Yes, he's most definitely shareable with normies. He's got his own show, which is a little bit calmer than the Towergang, a little bit different than, when he's been a guest on some of the other shows. In fact, like I said, he told Jose to keep it PG-13. It's probably gone out of the way, though, as we can see, that he's just kind of doing his own thing. But yes, he's got a bunch of these topics that I think are interesting, and he does he does a great job of the 25-year-old giving his point of view without really lecturing to you. Because sometimes, young kids, they think that the first time they've thought of something is the first time anyone else has ever thought of it. So they're brilliant. And I don't get that vibe from Nick at all. And I've been quite impressed with it. Conspiracy theory content, nothing really on the conspiracy theory spectrum, so to speak. But like all of these shows, kind of just depends on who your guest is and who you have on there. Okay, that's what we have. That's episode 18. The next episode is going to be not a podcast. I've been halfway through that. Like I said, I had a little, found out I was disassociated from one of the members on there. And I'm like, hey, I'm already through this. Now and I can't hate the show. If I knew how to block myself, I would do that as well. No hard feelings at all on that. But I will be reviewing that podcast and giving you a little bit more info about what I think about it. So thanks for checking this out. We're on Odyssey, Locals, YouTube, Overcast.fm, Spotify, Anchor.fm. That's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoy it. Check me out on Josh Smith's show, Break the Cycle. And I'm then having the Towergang guys come on here. When is that? I think that's the 29th or so of September. So maybe we'll try to do that one as a live show. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend or wherever you're doing out there. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter and like the show. Thanks.